August 30th BC, Alexandria, Egypt. Octavian had just conquered the world. He owned Egypt's gold, had won every battle, and was about to become Rome's first emperor. He had defeated Cleopatra and Mark Antony at Actium. He had watched Mark Antony die. He had taken Alexandria without resistance. But he was furious, because the one thing he truly needed to validate his power was locked inside a tomb and refused to come out. This is not the account of a military conquest. It is the record of 11 days in which a cornered queen played chess with fate and delivered the most humiliating checkmate in Roman history. If you've ever suspected that the story everyone tells is exactly the version someone wanted you to believe, you already think like AfterThrone. Subscribe. Every week there's another story like this one. 6 weeks earlier, Cleopatra still had 300 warships and Mark Antony, the greatest living Roman general, by her side. After Actium, she had nothing. The fleet sank. Mark Antony fled with her to Alexandria, where he ended up dying. The city was taken by Octavian, easily. With no options left, Cleopatra locked herself in the mausoleum she had ordered built years before, with all of Egypt's treasures and torches ready to burn everything before Octavian touched a single coin. When the soldiers broke down the door, she tried to kill herself on the spot. She was overpowered by force, dragged out, not escorted, dragged, before an audience of Roman officers that Octavian had specifically summoned to witness the scene. He wanted witnesses. He wanted the scene documented. He wanted everyone to know the Queen of Egypt had been pulled from her own tomb like a thief caught in the act. He already had everything. All that was missing was the Queen. Alive. In chains. Walking behind his carriage through the streets of Rome while the crowd roared. Without that, the victory was incomplete. Why? Because the Roman triumph was the most powerful political ritual of antiquity. It wasn't just a military celebration. It was a public declaration of absolute power. The victorious general paraded his captives at the front, alive, in chains, visible. Proof that resisting Rome ended only one way. Displaying Cleopatra alive in that procession would be the definitive argument that Rome was the only power that mattered, the image that would define Octavian's reign forever. Cleopatra was not just a defeated queen. She was a symbol, and symbols don't die by the sword. She was living proof that a woman could govern an empire without needing a man behind her, that Egypt was richer than Rome, that another world order was possible, centered on the Nile, not the Tiber. Mark Antony had believed that. He had abandoned Rome for her. He had recognized their children as heirs to eastern territories. For Octavian, killing Cleopatra would be easy. But killing what she represented demanded something more. It demanded displaying her broken, diminished, converted into a trophy. That's why he needed her alive, cooperative, and, above all, present at that procession. He tried for 11 days. What happened after haunted him forever. She was taken back to her own apartments in the palace, the same palace where she had governed for 22 years, now occupied by Octavian and his generals. The following day, he went to her. No ceremony. The terms were direct. Hand over the treasures, renounce the children, parade in chains through Rome. In exchange, her life and her children's. She asked for time to think. He agreed, convinced that the logic of the situation would do his work for him. First mistake. In the days that followed, Cleopatra didn't stay still. She began bribing Octavian's subordinates, creating fractures in the Roman command, buying time with the only currency she had left. Promises of future favors from a queen with no future. And she made small requests that seemed innocent. To visit Mark Antony's tomb, to receive medicine for the wounds from her capture, to have her 2 trusted servants, Iris and Charmian, always nearby. Every request was granted. Except there was something no one knew. While negotiating, she had stopped eating. Octavian sent doctors. They came back with a troubling report. Signs of suicidal intent. And then he deployed the cruelest weapon he had. He had her children brought in. 3 children, the twins Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, aged 10, and young Ptolemy Philadelphus, aged 6, all under armed guard. The message was clear. Any attempt at suicide, and the children would die with her. She had survived wars, coups, assassination attempts. But faced with this, she froze. She couldn't be certain it was a bluff, and Octavian knew that. What she didn't know, Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar, had already been hunted down and killed days before. 17 years old, already dead. She was being held hostage by the threat of losing children she had already, in part, lost. Her doctor documented those days. Self-inflicted wounds on her arms, hidden beneath her sleeves. Her appearance completely abandoned, unthinkable for a woman who had always weaponized her image. And hallucinations. She saw Mark Antony, spoke with him. On the 5th day, Octavian returned. She seemed destroyed. For hours, she agreed to everything, revealed where the hidden treasures were, gave information about Egyptian administration, promised full cooperation. Octavian left satisfied. He relaxed the guard. He began planning the triumph. And that's when the game began to change. In the days that followed, she visibly improved. She started eating again, chatted with the guards, made animated plans for Rome. Everything was reported to Octavian. He interpreted it as confirmation of victory. Her final request was simple: to visit Mark Antony's tomb one last time before departing for Rome. A farewell, a sentimental gesture from a cooperative prisoner. Octavian agreed. He believed he had destroyed the woman who had survived Caesar, Mark Antony, and 22 years of impossible politics. What happened next is even stranger. Cleopatra never intended to go to Rome. What was her plan, after all? From the moment Octavian relaxed his vigilance, she had been thinking about this. But the idea wasn't to escape. She knew there was no way out. Her plan was to control the only thing still in her hands: how she would die, and what that death would mean. If this story is keeping you hooked, drop a like now. It's what helps the channel reach more people. And in the comments, do you think she planned everything from the start, or improvised as the situation closed in? We'd love to know. She knew exactly what she needed to do: die in a way that wouldn't look intentional. Because if the guards realized it was suicide, the children would die. But there was also a calculation about the children. Octavian's threat was only valid while she was alive, and he needed control over her. After she died, killing 3 children as posthumous revenge would be a scandal even by Roman standards. She bet on that. And there was one more detail. It wasn't enough just to die. She needed to control what that death meant. The official story is beautiful. Cleopatra returned from the tomb, dressed in her royal robes, had one last meal. She had a basket of figs brought in, with a sacred snake hidden inside. Egypt's sacred serpent carried her peacefully to death, like a queen. It's almost certainly a lie. The venom of a sacred snake doesn't kill quickly or peacefully. And when the guards entered the room, they found not just Cleopatra dead, but also her 2 servants, Iris and Charmian, dead in the same room at the same time. One serpent killing 3 adult women in minutes isn't biology, it's myth. The most likely explanation: she used a fast-acting poison, opium with hemlock, or something similar, prepared in advance and hidden in the medicines she had requested during her captivity. The marks on her arm were probably from direct injection into the bloodstream. She had studied toxicology for years. Every request she had made since her capture, the medicines, the servants, the visits, had been built to reach this moment. But then, why the story of the snake?
Because she created that story, deliberately. She had instructed the servants. Iris and Charmian knew everything, and died with her, from the same poison. When the guards broke down the door, Charmian was still standing, adjusting the queen's diadem. A soldier shouted, "Is this right, Charmian?" She answered, "Perfectly right, and worthy of a descendant of so many kings," and fell. The mark on Cleopatra's arm was interpreted as a snake bite. Octavian didn't deny it. The sacred serpent version fit perfectly into the narrative of the Oriental sorceress he was building. She had bet on that too. And she won. The sacred snake wasn't just a serpent in Egypt. It was the symbol of divine royalty, the sacred animal of the goddess Wadjet. Dying from the bite of the sacred snake wasn't suicide. It was transformation. It was the rite of passage of a pharaoh into eternal life. It was Cleopatra affirming, in her final second, what she had affirmed her entire life: that she was the incarnation of Isis, a goddess, not a prisoner. She chose a death that Rome couldn't understand, and therefore couldn't steal. Octavian's fury. When the guards found the bodies, Octavian was summoned immediately. Ancient sources are unanimous about what happened next. It wasn't composure. It wasn't respect for a fallen enemy. It was rage. Pure rage, because she had taken the one thing no military victory could replace: the right to parade her through the streets of Rome. The trophy that would have turned all that war into an eternal argument. Without her alive, the triumph was hollow. He ordered doctors to try to revive the body. They failed. He even considered displaying the preserved corpse at the victory procession anyway, a substitute for the living prisoner he had been denied. His advisors said no. That would be sacrilege even by Roman standards, and would turn the victor into a desperate man. So Octavian chose another weapon, one that worked for 2,000 years. He launched a campaign to destroy her memory. Statues torn down in Alexandria, inscriptions erased from monuments, and, most importantly, a narrative spread by Roman poets, historians, and politicians. The narrative that Cleopatra was not an intelligent ruler who nearly turned the world upside down. She was a seductress, an oriental enchantress, a woman whose only power was her body, and who had used that body to corrupt noble, rational Roman men. Caesar and Antony hadn't allied themselves with her for political strategy. They had been bewitched, victims. And it worked. For centuries, that was the Cleopatra the world knew, the dangerous seductress of the Nile. Shakespeare wrote her that way. Hollywood filmed her that way. The woman of extraordinary intelligence, who spoke 9 languages, who governed an empire for 22 years, buried under the character Octavian invented to take revenge on her. The only queen he couldn't control. Controlled, in the end, by the story he wrote about her. But the real story lived in the details Rome preferred not to tell. Octavian had promised to spare Cleopatra's children, the 3 who were still alive, the twins Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, and young Ptolemy Philadelphus. The promise didn't last. Alexander Helios and Ptolemy Philadelphus disappeared from the historical record shortly after, executed, exiled, or dead in Roman custody. No one knows. The silence says it all. Only Cleopatra Selene survived, married off to an African king as a piece of Roman foreign policy. The last Ptolemaic heir, used as a bargaining chip. Octavian got Egypt. The gold, the grain, the territory. The title of Augustus and an empire that lasted 5 centuries. But he didn't get what he wanted most. Cleopatra didn't parade through Rome. She wasn't displayed as a trophy. She wasn't converted into an argument for his greatness. She chose when to die, how to die, and, by creating the story of the sacred snake, what her death would mean to the people who loved her. Octavian won the world, and lost the only game that truly mattered. In the final move, she won. Cleopatra chose every detail of her own ending. She knew what she was doing. She knew what it meant. And she played until the very last second. The next episode is about someone who never had that chance. An ordinary man. An ordinary afternoon. And something glowing in the palm of a hand. And no one knew what it was. Goiânia, the man who gave light to death. The link is on the screen now and in the first pinned comment. Thank you for staying until the end.
If these stories resonate with you, share this with someone who'd appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel and leave your comment. See you in the next one.